Good morning and welcome back to day 2 of the BYP Network Leadership Conference. To kick off our keynotes this morning, we're excited to welcome Sherry Zinoreva, Director of Policy Programs.
Good morning. Goodness, thank you so much for having me. I cannot tell you how excited I am to kick off this morning's session. This is amazing. The fact that I'm able to actually do this covering a topic that's so close and dear to my heart just means everything. It's crazy though. They told me I had 20 to 30 minutes to cover a topic, and I like talking, but I don't like talking that much. So I'm thinking, all right, what am I actually going to discuss for 20 to 30 minutes? And then I realized that, I could talk about something that has been so close and so dear to me, especially over the past year and a half, and that is community, right? Um, at Facebook this month, we all know that we celebrated Black History Month here in the UK, and we've been hosting a series of conversations within our Black community at Facebook that really just discusses the various experiences that we've had being people of color and of the diaspora living in this region. And I had an amazing opportunity to take part in a conversation called Black is Not a Monolith. And that was all about celebrating the varied backgrounds that we have and experiences that we have as people who've reigned from the diaspora and from Africa. And then to be able to tell our stories is not one of a single story, but that full of richness and history and color. And they started out the conversation asking everyone to think of 3 words that describe Blackness. So what are the first 3 words that you think about when you think about Blackness? And the first thing that came to my mind was community. Because no matter where I've lived, from New York to London to Johannesburg, a strong sense of community is this one single thread that I've seen that's connected all of us all over the world. It's what binds us, and it's what sits at our core, right? So a few years ago, I started referencing my tribe. And who are my tribes? My tribe are like this special group of people who I've met along my life and my career journey, friends who become family, those who've aligned on mission and purpose. And it's just interesting because I started recognizing it more the older I got and the more I started traveling, the different people I've met who've come from so many different backgrounds that are very different from mine. But somehow we still connect on something that just sits at our core. And these people have just over time become members of what I consider to be my tribe. And these are the people who I know are going to be in my life forever. And without them, I'm completely lost. And while I've always valued my tribe, right, and I've enjoyed playing connector I love playing connector, right? Finding someone who I know can benefit from knowing someone else. The past year and a half really showed me just how much this community of like-minded individuals can be a real lifesaver, right? They're like my rock, like a real source of truth when needed the most. And isolation and lockdown and living in this world of uncertainty really put a lot of things to the test. But one of the things that definitely became more apparent was the power of my tribe. And this really made me think a lot about the ways that community shows up in my life, from personal friends to work and business. And through this reflection, I've come to realize just how much one's community can be a vital part of life and success. Because as humans, we're not meant to walk this earth alone, right? I am because we are. And this notion is nothing new to us as children of Africa and the diaspora, right? Ubuntu is a concept, a philosophy that can be found in so many languages across the continent. And it's core to this. And I've definitely seen firsthand how this connects so many of us all over the world. However, as we live and work in societies that reward personal gain and live by notions of survival of the fittest or pulling oneself up by their bootstraps, how can we move beyond this in the worlds that we're constantly living in and working in on a day-to-day basis, and truly honor what's true to us, right? What's at our core, what our ancestors have put in place to really dictate how we move about in the worlds that we live, right? And in order to do this, I thought, let's break down 3 key areas where community shows up in our lives and how we can learn to nurture these relationships, learn how to identify the people who can really be part of our community over time. And most importantly, how to feel comfortable leaning in and leaning on our community when needed, right? So let's start with our personal community. So I won't spend too much time on this because we talked about it a little bit earlier, right? This is our tribe, right? These are our people. Like these are the people who are going to hold us down and help us through when times are really tough. I think I consider my tribe like family, like the people who aren't blood related, but they're basically like family. Some of them are childhood friends of mine, but a lot of them are actually former workmates or clients or industry associates who just over time have moved into my circle of trust. I spent the first 12 years of my career working in the media and entertainment industry in New York. And my work and my personal life just were completely intertwined. I've since learned to get a lot better at that. But at that time, I spent, from the time I was early 20s until my early mid 30s, everything was just blended into one. I would go into the office at 9. I would leave sometimes at 8. I'd go and have dinner with somebody. I'd then go to some kind of industry party. I'd get home at 12 and I'd wake up the next morning and do the exact same thing all over again, right? I really dedicated a lot of time just kind of building a name for myself in the industry and just allowing my life, my work and social to just be one big thing. But through that process, I built some amazing friendships and some amazing connections that I still hold dear to my heart to this day. I recently read this quote by this amazing, um, you know, just prolific philosopher, Issa Rae, who said, "Who's next to you? Who's struggling? Who's in the trenches with you? Who's just as hungry as you are?" Right? Those are the people who you should build with. And I live by that, right? Because the trenches are rough, but they don't last forever. And the bonds that are formed in that process can be really beautiful and fruitful and last a lifetime. And one of the greatest joys in my life have been just being able to celebrate and support members of my tribe who, when we were young, we were out hustling, broke, eating dinner at industry parties because we couldn't afford it on our own, but we were just out hustling, trying to make names for ourselves. But now many of us are at the forefront of culture and business and innovation. And who else to collaborate with and to continue to work with are those who you've been through the trenches with and who you trust. And there's something that really goes a long way in that. So now building your personal tribe is definitely one of personal choice. Mine just happens to be a mix of childhood friends and sort of industry work life relationships. But either way you cut it, these are the connections that are going to be with you for life, and they deserve to be nurtured. And so often we get caught up in like work and life that we forget to check in on these people that are really most important to us. I'm definitely a victim of that. Before I had a child and things had to slow down, I didn't know which way was up. I was working so much that I sort of forgot about those people who were holding me down for such a long period of time. And I think definitely having a kid down really put a lot of things in perspective for me. And I get it, right? Because we travel more, we meet more people, life demands. So we're not 16 anymore, where friendships are at the core of our lives, right? We have to think about all these different things. But sometimes something as simple as sending an article that you think someone would appreciate, or sending a little joke or meme or something you see via WhatsApp can be just that little thing, just to show someone that they're top of mind and that you're thinking of them. During the pandemic, a really dear friend of mine, Kenya Hunt, wrote a book of essays on Black womanhood. And it came out last November, so right as we were going into the second lockdown, and which was a really tough time. And so I decided, I was like, I'm going to buy a bunch of copies of this book, and I'm going to send it to all my girl tribe all over the world with a personal note and send it in a post just to tell them how much they mean to me. And it's crazy because I can't remember the last time I actually wrote a personal note to anyone, right? Or even more or less took a whole bunch of packages to send through the post. But it was just a really small gesture of something that I could do to just show my appreciation and my love for these women who've been holding me down over years. And I don't know if I would have taken the time to do that if it wasn't for that, but it just really showed me how much these little things can really make a difference. So the important takeaway here is, once you identify your tribe, invest in them, nurture that connection that you hold, because if everything in your life is taken away, these are the people who are going to hold you down. Now, the second way that family often shows up in our lives is through affinity groups. These communities are often built on something that you have in common with a group of people who you may otherwise never connect with, right? We often see social media like Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups and other similar tech sort of platforms being really powerful tools in bringing these communities together. But this is nothing new. These things have been around forever. Tech just kind of makes things a little bit easier to bring these communities in one place. But you think about your professional associations or your gaming communities or your advocacy groups. Each of these are quite different, but the impact of people coming together based on shared interests is powerful. And online tools have just made it a little bit easier for these things to happen. Now, I've experienced this firsthand, right? As I mentioned, I'm a new mom. And when I was pregnant 2 years ago, me and 6 other moms who were at Facebook at the time created this WhatsApp group because we were all pregnant and we were just not trying to come to terms with everything that was going on with our bodies and what was going to come. And so we decided to start a WhatsApp group just to support ourselves through this journey. And since then, this group has grown to over 60 women. It's just one person referring another person, referring another person. Obviously, all women we all are connected by the fact that we have children and we work at the same company, but we also kind of come with a very similar vibe, a very similar kind of energy. And that really has made this community a safe space for so many of us who just need someone to lean on when we just have a question or an issue. I also live in Southeast London. I live in Forest Hill. I've been here since I moved to London. After having a kid, I actually discovered this group called Forest Hill Moms, and it's made up of mothers in the area who I've never actually physically met in person, which is crazy. But everyone in this group is so committed to just helping each other out and giving advice. It's just so beautiful to see how much people are willing to lean in for people who they've never actually personally met. And so it's crazy. Like during the pandemic, I needed a desk because I needed to learn how to work out of my room. I sent a message on this group, and within 30 minutes, I found a desk that was in walking distance from my house. I was looking for childcare, and I got so many direct messages from moms who were able to give me like, not just, hey, here's someone to recommend, but like, hey, I don't think you should check out this person because of XYZ, right? It's just so interesting how just finding those common interests, people are able to make those connections. It's a really powerful thing. But also at Facebook, this is something that serves as part of the DNA of our corporate culture. So upon joining the company, new employees are often encouraged to find affinity groups that are aligned with our passion and our identity. And this has gone a long way in fostering a sense of community within the organization. So I talked earlier about our Black Act community, and with chapters all around the world, from Germany to Brazil to London to South Africa. All people, anyone who identifies themselves as being Black is able to kind of join this community and be a part of this amazing connection. So often within our teams where we're the only Black person or one of very few, these communities can really be a vital part of our experiences within the company. Now, again, you may not have everything in common with some of the people in these communities outside of the things that bring you together. But the impact that these communities can have on providing much needed personal support or even advocating for change in our communities can be so huge. So just think about the role that affinity groups might play in your life, right? Are you a member of any now? Is there space to create one in your job or in your industry? It's something that can actually, bring value to you or even to your community. And if you are involved, are you putting in the work? Right now, when it comes to nurturing your relationships in these groups, even though you may not have the long-term personal relationships that you would with your tribe, you have to go in with the same energy that you would with your tribe, right? Because the output might be a little bit different, but the same rules definitely apply. And the only way that these communities thrive is if everybody's putting in the time and investment to make it work. So you do that and guarantee you'll make it work for yourself as well. Now, finally, lastly, how does community show up in work and business, right? And I'll start with our colleagues. So with every job that I've ever had over the past 20 plus years, I'm not going to tell you how many, I've always had at least one, if not two people in the company who I can really trust, right? And these are people who, I can send my presentation before I send it to my boss. These are the people who I can trust to give me real honest feedback with no ulterior motives. They're the ones who can tell me, yo, sis, you're messing up. You need to get your stuff together. Maybe you should have said that in this meeting. They can bring you back to center when sometimes you really need that trusted voice. They can also be a lifesaver when you just need somebody to vent about that project that's kept you up all night, or that promotion that you didn't get, or that person who's playing for your position. I think we all kind of have probably been in one of these situations at least once. And now identifying these colleagues usually comes with time, and usually a shared project, a cup of coffee or wine after work, and you realize, yo, I like this person. I think I'm going to bring them into my personal circle. And so how do you attract this community that's right for you in a work setting? And I think one way to do this, and I think it's really important to think about, is what do you value, right? This is what do you value within a work setting? You're coming into these organizations as an individual. What do you really stand for? And how do these things manifest in your approach to your work and your work relationships with your colleagues? Are you trusted, right? Or do you see the value of the whole versus the one? And I think this is sometimes an interesting thing because oftentimes in work, people are get we rewarded based on individual merit. So some corporate cultures, I'm not saying all, but some are such that people feel like if I'm out for self, I'm gonna move up, right? I have to always think about myself. I can't think about the community, or I think very strategically about building community, but not in a way that's not going to benefit myself. And this concept of kind of it's business, it's not personal. This is a phrase that I think we all know, we know very well. And sometimes we use it when tough decisions have to be made that cross work and friendship lines. But how you value community and how you value human connection can really make a difference in how you maneuver these types of situations. I've seen so many times how people who actually value the power of we versus I manage to achieve success far beyond any promotion or company status. Because in the end, it's people who drive organizations, right? And without them, an individual can only go so far. So I think there's a lot to really play with and understand there. So being clear on these things will really naturally, hopefully, just reveal who in your organization can be part of your community. And that should be seen right in front of your eyes. And at least I hope so, right? Because if not, then I think you might want to check your personal situation, because hopefully you have at least someone within your organization who you can lean on in this particular way. But what if it doesn't show up, right? I believe we have the power to build community within our organizations, even if it doesn't currently exist, or perhaps if you haven't found it. Is there an opportunity for you to build an affinity group like the one that I touched on before that can help yourself or help colleagues who are connected by passions or beliefs to support and make a difference within your organization or within your community? If you're leading a team, how can you foster a sense of community within your own team so that it's ingrained in how team members interact with each other and how and how you interact with your stakeholders, both internal or external? Now, within our Africa, Middle East, and Turkey team, which I've been so blessed and privileged to be a part of during my tenure at this company, we've established a very clear mission and set of principles that guide how we work with each other and how we work with stakeholders externally and also other colleagues within the organization. And this is something that was co-created with everyone in the team. So no one was left out of this process and everyone is completely aligned. And it's funny because so oftentimes we'll find ourselves referencing some of these traits when we're talking about things that we've done or projects that we've worked on or accomplishments that we've had. And this speaks volumes to how much this really sits at our core. And all of this is very much grounded in trust and community. I think this also says a lot about the fact that most of us are coming with a very similar sense of purpose and drive and why we're at the company in the first place. But hands down, this has made a huge difference in my experience and in my ability to both lead my team and also hire new people who are similarly aligned in mission and purpose. So community can show up in a lot of different ways at work that can benefit not only the individual, but the organization as well. So, all right, I've identified these 3 ways that community can show up in your life and some tips on how to identify and nurture these relationships. But the one thing I also want to make sure that we walk away with is how do we lean on these communities and feel comfortable really doing that, right? A lot of times I think we could be part of these groups and we're like, all right, I know I'm not alone. I'm part of these communities. It exists. But how often are you actually leaning in on people? Do you feel like you can actually trust the people in your community? A lot of times, and I know I've been victim of this as well, to say, okay, I'm part of this group. I don't really want to burden these people with my problems, or I don't want to feel like I owe them after they show me some level of kindness, right? So I did someone's showing you love, and you feel like, okay, now I have to do the same for them. But maybe people are just doing it because they're humans and they want to actually show you love, right? I think as humans, we have a desire to both receive and to give love. And there's nothing wrong with being on the receiving end of that. This has happened for me so many times when friends and colleagues have shown up for me in the most amazing of ways. And while I love it, there is a small part of me that's like, what did I do to deserve this? Right? Like, because maybe sometimes we don't always see ourselves showing such random acts of kindness as often. And maybe that speaks volumes to the society that we live in. But I want us to feel comfortable feeling the sense of community, not just being in one, but also feeling comfortable leaning in on these communities and relying on each other as well. So I encourage you, as we go into the rest of today's sessions, as you go into your weekend, to really think about the power of collaboration and the role that community can play in how you both, live your life and in your career. Because I'm a living testament to it. I raise my hands. It has made such a difference in my life, and I'm learning more about it every single day. And I really believe that if we move in this way, we'll be well on our way to setting up the world and our future generations to come. So thank you so much. And I hope you got a lot out of this. So, goodness, I see so many questions coming up, and I am really excited to see this. I'm going to moderate this myself. So let's see what I can see. Thank you so much, everyone, for your feedback. Sometimes it's weird. I'm talking to people on a screen and I can't see anyone. So I don't know if folks are falling asleep or they're taking notes or they're laughing or crying. But the questions, this definitely speaks volumes. So thank you, everyone. Oh, this is a good one. Question from Sarah English. What advice would you give to someone in the diaspora who wants to grow their tribe of like-minded individuals? I'm really struggling with connecting with other Africans in the UK and would love some realistic advice. So it's interesting. Obviously I'm not British, right? And I've often had conversations with people who come from other parts of the world and move here and really struggle to find community in the UK. And I'll be honest, like as an American, I've found that the connections that I've been able to make in this country have been some really solid, long-lasting relationships. And nothing against my fellow Americans or people from other parts of the world I've connected with, but sometimes it might be harder to penetrate these circles. But once you do, they're there for life, and I think that speaks a long way. So I would almost, sort of think about what spaces you're in. So is it, you know, do you have any communities of other, and I would say maybe other Africans, but even other like-minded Africans? So there may be some who you're like, okay, because I know I've been in situations where people are like, oh, you should connect with so-and-so. You're both women, or you're both Black, or you're both from the US, and you connect with them. You're like, I actually have nothing in common with them. So think about like, who are the types of Africans or from they're, who have a certain mindset that may be similar to yours, who you might want to connect with. And I think there's also power of interconnection. So if there's one person who might know someone else, because there's a lot that I've been able to build a community based on just introductions and being in spaces where someone introduces me to someone else. Finding those opportunities is often sort of can be somewhat useful as well. If there are other community groups that you might be aware of, or groups within your organization that you can be a part of, that could be another sort of useful way to find to connect with those as well. But that's a really good question, and I know it can be really hard coming into a country where you're not from, and helping to sort of find community in that sense. Gosh, this other question from Alex Adevu. When a community is compromised, how do you restore trust, relationships, and get going afresh? And I had a conversation with a good friend of mine about this very recently. So this is why this really stood out for me. And it's a difficult one, right? Because sometimes you have this strong community and everyone's connected, and someone does something that's really foul, and then they have to leave, and then that kind of messes up the sort of dynamic of that particular community. And it might be a little bit difficult, I think. And I maybe it'd be worth having a better understanding of, when you say compromise, how is it, depending on how that community is compromised. I think that is something to sort of think about. If it's something where one individual did something that's a bit questionable, maybe that person kind of stepping out of the community and having to then rebuild the community with those who are around is sort of the way to go. If there's other types of compromising that's happened within larger numbers of people within the community, that might be a little bit more difficult. So I would think about, what is the root of that issue, and really having to think about, how do you kind of step outside of that to rebuild that community with those who you still do trust, understanding that some have just had to be taken out, or some had, or some people you just can't trust. You have to kind of rebuild with the people who are in that existing within that existing group. But I think it's really important to kind of continue to identify with those who you have kind of found that connection with and who you do trust, even when a few members of that connection have been somewhat sort of compromised. Let's see. This is another one from I do not want to mispronounce your name. Panele Nazi. How do we build trust? How do we build trust within these communities? And I think I was listening to a talk very recently. We were thinking about there are three key areas that are key, and Frances Faye is her name. She did an amazing TED talk. She's a Harvard Business School professor, used to work at Uber. Did a really great talk about building trust within communities and more particularly within communities and in companies and organizations, and identified three key areas. One of them is, sort of, you want to say kind of transparency, or just kind of being able to show up as your authentic self within an organization. The other one is kind of like credibility. So are you someone who people can trust because when you say you're going to do something, you actually do it? Or when you're kind of standing up in meetings, the things that you say, you have proper follow through, you come through with proper logic, and people trust like your way of thinking. That's kind of another key pillar. And the other one is empathy. And so your ability to not just say you're empathetic, but actually show your empathy in your relationships with others. And the idea is if these three things are in place, that it makes it a little bit easier for trust to be built within communities. So I think that's one thing to think about, how you are showing up as your authentic self within the organization that you work in. Hopefully, are you in an organization that allows you to do that and makes it so that that's something you feel comfortable doing, that you feel like you can succeed in your company by coming to the organization as your authentic self. I think that's a really important piece. But finding out what is authenticity to you, and are you able to exude that in the way that you treat your colleagues as a leader, in the way that you treat your team, and the way you set the standards for your team. Are you being empathetic to others and understanding their situations as well? And then lastly, how, are you who you say you are? Are you being a credible person? And so I think if you make it so that people can trust you, when you think about those qualities, you'll then be able to hopefully seek out those qualities in others and hopefully help to build trust in that process. So I hope that helps to answer your question. I have 2 more minutes, so I think I may answer one more question. Yes. I really like this one from Sophia McKenzie. Starting my role remotely has made it tricky to build these community relationships as you miss the water cooler conversation. That's real. Do you have any tips on building these community relationships virtually? So this has been something I've really been trying to do a lot with my team, because I actually have team members who are in Dubai, London, Nairobi, Lagos, and Johannesburg. So it's been crazy. And I have 2 people who've started remotely. I've never actually physically met them, and they have been working remotely from day one. And I think it's been really difficult building this sense of community without actually being able to meet people in person. So there are a few things I think you can do. One, we had a group offsite, which is like basically 4 hours in a day where we just kind of came together and started discussing like things that are happening in our group. But before that, I had each team member send their top 10 songs. And this was during the time of the pandemic, where I think music kind of helps everyone along. Everyone sent their top 10 songs. I created a Spotify playlist of all of everyone's music. And we created like this music that we were all sort of connected to, or connected by our favorite songs. And we were able to kind of find out a little bit more about each other through that process. So that was one thing I did, and I think everyone really enjoyed it and we shared it with other people in the company. Also, sometimes taking calls with people while we're on a meeting and being able to say, let's all like take our calls from the street while we actually go and take a walk, or we all go to a park where we might not be able to actually meet in person, but we can be connected by doing something that's a little bit different from others as well. And I'm sorry I'm at time, but this is something I really wish I could have gone down and spoken to a lot more, because I do think there's a lot that could be done around that. But hopefully those 2 tips might be somewhat helpful as you're thinking about this. So again, thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate your questions. I'm so happy to be here to kick off. Please, if you have time during lunchtime, go and check out the Facebook booth. We have people there who can share a lot of information about what we're doing, and enjoy the rest of today's sessions and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.